24. The manufacture of humanity. There are many accounts to be found, around the world in the religious books and legends of mankind, as to how a cosmic race of gods from outside the chemical universe manufactured humanity. We have described elsewhere how the first 2 chapters of Genesis contain 2 entirely separate creation stories. The first creation story refers to the establishment of the Golden Age, the creation of galactic man. So God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Genesis 1:27-28. The second creation story in the next chapter of Genesis refers to the manufacture of humans, with an earth animal chemical body, the making of a second Adam by the Jehovah. It is noticeable, that in the second creation only Adam was made. Doubtless, not just one Adam but a race of humans. In the first creation both males and females were created. It is not till some time later in the second story that a mate was provided for Adam, through taking a rib from him. At least, that is what we are told in Genesis. Erich von Däniken in his fascinating book, Return to the Stars, writing on the creation accounts, suggests very sensibly, in the light of our present scientific knowledge, that Eve was produced in a retort. However, he appears to have completely missed the point that the first 2 chapters of Genesis contain 2 entirely separate creation stories. The second Adam, humanity, animal man, was not originally intended by his makers, the Jehovah, to be developed to a high estate. He was manufactured to keep and to guard the Garden of Eden. This is stated quite clearly in Genesis. It would seem that some of the sky people, known as the dragon or serpent people, since time immemorial may have visited the garden out of curiosity to learn what was going on there, as it was guarded by these newly made humans. Dutifully, the humans no doubt turned them away. However, we can surmise that fraternization took place between the serpent people and the human women folk. Probably, the sky people took compassion on these primitive animal humans, walking around naked, and enlightened them on a few of the facts of life. When the Jehovah, Elohim, came round on their next tour of inspection, they found Adam hiding in the brushwood wearing some kind of clothes. The Jehovah asked point blank, "Who told thee that thou wast naked?" He was very angry. This exasperation occurred again when he cursed the sky people for their interference. The rest you know. This was the so-called fall. The humans were turned out of the garden, and taken back to the place from whence they were originally taken, the planet Earth. Tradition has it, that an unholy row occurred between the race of Jehovah, and some of the other Elohim, who had not taken part in the manufacture of humanity, and that the Jehovah accompanied his human creation back to Earth. The Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiche Maya, described at least 4 attempts by the gods to manufacture suitable beings to serve and worship them. However, before these efforts, they first made a race called Uviniqual Huyub, the little man of the forest, but he was not human. He did not have a chemical animal body. He was reminiscent of the elves, fairies, and gnomes of European folklore. These are still with us today. Then, the gods tried to get the animals and birds to worship them, but they could not make words. This experiment failed. So, they tried again. They set about producing obedient, respectful beings, to nourish and sustain them. First, they tried to make a man out of mud, but the mud melted. It could speak a little, but could not reproduce itself. They destroyed the mud men and held another conference. They then decided to make men out of wood who would nourish, sustain, invoke, and remember them. The new wooden creatures lived and multiplied, but were, also, a disappointment. They wandered about on all fours, had no soul, were mindless, and, worst of all, they had no memory. They too, failed to nourish, sustain, invoke, adore, or remember their makers, so the heart of heaven, Huracan, destroyed them all in a great flood. In the Maya country, there is a plant which produces a pod containing red seeds like beans. The Creator and the Maker decided to use these as materials in their next attempt to make humans. They proposed to make woman's flesh from rushes. However, this third type of man fared no better than his predecessors, so he too, had to be destroyed. Some time afterwards, a fourth and last attempt was made. 4 animals are said to have shown the gods where to obtain the necessary material, a ground corn, to make an intelligent being who would remember his creators. The four animals led the way to two villages, so-called Paxil and Kyala. According to the Popol Vuh, Smakane, the grandmother, prepared the materials for the flesh of mankind. She ground together the white and yellow maize, and made 9 drinks. Then Tipu and Gukamots took the cornmeal dough she made for them, and made 4 men, the first fathers of the human race. These were wise men, versed in magic, without ancestors, and they were the first representatives of humanity as it now exists on Earth. This somewhat amusing account described here from the Popol Vuh is obviously a lot of mythology, fairy lore and legend, but nevertheless, does tie into a great extent with the manufacture of humanity, as given in Genesis. There are many other similar accounts of the manufacture of humanity in the folklore of other countries. However, it would seem that since the Sky People made and put us here, they have not only continued to pay visits to our planet, but to interbreed with us. For what purpose? 25. Are we a hybrid race? Darwin's theory of evolution is widely accepted as regards life in general, but in the case of mankind, it has one drawback. The emergence of the brain of mankind on this planet was too quick. Even Darwin was worried on this score and realized that natural selection might not be the complete answer in respect of mankind. It has long been appreciated that there is a hypothetical missing link. A contemporary American writer, Otto Binder, states emphatically that mankind appeared so suddenly on the scene because he was a planned hybrid, a cross between super-intelligent sky people and sub-intelligent ape men on Earth. Binder quoted from a revolutionary book called On Tiptoe Beyond Darwin, by Max Flint. The author posed the question: is it because man's brain is an import? Flint wrote, except for man, the best that nature could do on land was to develop 3 great ape families. This means that it took nature 500 million years to develop 1 million neurons, the maximum capacity of an anthropoid brain. At this rate, 1 neuron was developed every 6 months, and man, with his 10 billion neurons, should have taken 10 times as long as the apes in order to develop his fantastic brain. 10 times 500 million years is 5 billion years. Binder comments, yet man and his superb thinking organ, they would have us believe, came out of the evolutionary pod in a mere 2 million years. Obviously, nature did not create man's brain. The sky men did in an ancient breeding experiment, or a series of them. Is there any evidence for this startling theory? I suggest that there is a case to be examined. We have already given some indication that the Sky People put us here in the last 2 chapters. However, there are legends all over the world indicating that the gods came down to Earth and mingled with us mortals. The Maya, Aztecs, Inca people, Etruscans, ancient Egyptians, Greeks, North American Indians, Hawaiians, Scandinavians, Chinese, Japanese, Indians, and the Irish, all relate similar accounts of godlike beings visiting them in ancient times. Admittedly, all this stems from mythology, legend and folklore, but when so many diverse peoples scattered all over the world recount similar tales, it surely must be significant. Then there are the famous verses in Genesis, which definitely report mating between extraterrestrials and terrestrials. That the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Genesis 6:2. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. One of the first known civilizations of which we have records, is that of Sumeria. Dr. Carl Sagan, of Harvard University and the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, co-authored with Dr. Ashklovsky, of the Sternberg Astronomical Institute, Soviet Academy of Sciences, a notable work entitled, Intelligent Life in the Universe. In the book, Dr. Sagan commented on the fact that such a brilliant civilization should have suddenly emerged from nowhere. He came across a legend of a special quality, and stated that it was of great interest as it related to the origin of the Sumerian civilization. No one knows from where the Sumerians originated. Sagan feels that if the Sumerian civilization was described by their descendants to be of extraterrestrial origin, then legends such as this one, the Apkallu, should be examined thoroughly. He was careful to add that the legend described in his book was not necessarily an example of contact between humans and non-humans, but it was of a caliber that deserved more careful study. The legend tells of contact being made on the shores of the Persian Gulf in the 4th millennium BC, or earlier. Dr. Sagan goes on to say that the Earth may have been visited by galactic civilizations many times in antiquity. We have mentioned this interesting legend, if only to point out that some of the new breed of enlightened scientists today are prepared to consider that we have been visited in the past by sky people. Now, in our earlier chapters in this section, we postulated that the first creation given in Genesis was that of galactic man. It is our idea that galactic man may be the inhabitant of billions of planets in our chemical universe. Scientists today concede that there are millions of planets in our galaxy alone, which may be inhabited by intelligent thinking beings. Is it not possible that there may be a super-federation of galactic planets? Our own Fred Hoyle, Plumian Professor of Astronomy at Cambridge University, in his book, Of Men and Galaxies, wrote, "You are all familiar with an ordinary telephone directory. You want to speak to someone, you look up his number, and you dial the appropriate code. My speculation is that a similar situation exists, and has existed for billions of years in the galaxy. My speculation is that an interchange of messages is going on a vast scale, all the time, and that we are as unaware of it, as a pygmy in the African forests is unaware of the radio messages that flash at the speed of light around the Earth. My guess is there might be 1 million or more subscribers to the galactic directory. Our problem is to get our name into that directory. There may well be a central galactic civilization which has steadily colonized all the inhabitable planets, including Earth, over a long period of time. They may have conducted a series of breeding experiments at different stages of our long history, and may now be watching our development with great interest. However, we can be certain of one thing. If the sky people have periodically mated with Earth people to hasten mankind's evolution, the brain capacity of sky people must be far superior to that of Earth men. Flint, mentioned earlier, postulates that the sky people must have a brain capacity of at least 3000 cc compared with a human's 1300 cc today. A breeding program between sky people and earlier ape men with about 800 cc capacity would have produced the middle way brain of modern man. If so, the biblical comment that we were made higher than the animals, and lower than the angels is only too true. Possibly, the sky people are still breeding with us. We might not learn of such a happening. Who would dare state that he or she had had a sexual experience with an extraterrestrial? And, if they did so, who would believe them? However, this has happened in modern times, if we believe the account of Antonio Villas-Boas, a young Brazilian farmer. His story has been given in full detail over many issues of Flying Saucer Review, and also related in several books. His account has been very fully investigated by the late Dr. Olavo Fontes, who undoubtedly considered it a true experience. How do we know for certain that other similar cases have not occurred? Antonio Villas-Boas was extremely reluctant to relate his experiences, and this is most understandable. If it is true that interbreeding between the two races of mankind, and elsewhere is still going on today, then the brain capacity of mankind in the future may be advanced from 1300 cc, to somewhere nearer that of the sky people. Indeed, this could be the long-range plan. The ideas expressed here are highly controversial, but the concept of sky people interbreeding with humanity does explain the missing link. There is no other factor that can account for the far too rapid evolution of mankind's brain, which is contrary to Darwin's theory of natural selection, and the normal gradual evolution of a species by nature. Perhaps, after all, we are a hybrid race, partly descended from super-intelligent sky people and sub-intelligent ape men. Why is it that mankind alone, apart from all other species on this planet, when he is not fighting wars or enmeshed with his daily worries, has a sense of destiny? Deep down inside, mankind subconsciously knows that he is part of some tremendous cosmic scheme. If we are, indeed, a hybrid race, then one day we may take our place in a much wider civilization, a galactic one. This would be in every sense of the words, a giant leap for mankind. This cosmic concept, if you can accept it, does explain why the occupants of the UFOs today have such a great interest in us. It would seem that they have made, and put us here in the first place, and subsequently interbred with us. They have watched our progress over thousands of years, involving catastrophes upon our planet, and are still with us today while we take our first brave steps into space. 26. History repeats itself. On November 13, 1970, the London Evening Standard, followed by the next day's morning papers, TV, and radio, broke the news that a British scientist, Dr. James Danieli, and his two assistants from King's College in London, had produced the simplest form of life, by putting in a test tube, pieces of living cells. They knew success had been achieved when they looked down their microscopes, at New York State University, in Buffalo, and saw that the cells had broken apart on their own, and had reproduced themselves hundreds of times. Dr. Danieli predicted that new animals, new plants, and new microorganisms would eventually be synthesized using this method. He considered that a human living creature could be made eventually. Possibly in 20 years. This scientist is fully aware of the unscrupulous use power-hungry men may make of his breakthrough in this field. For example, by juggling the genes and chromosomes, you could make a docile race, or alternatively, a brutal one of fighting men. A frightening thought. However, it now seems that humanity is going to take its turn at usurping the role of the Elohim. We are going to imitate them, and make a race of humans, who no doubt, will be required to serve, guard, and keep our garden. Strange, how history repeats itself.